Ring, ring.
Oh,
May I speak to Mr. Cofer, please?
this is him.
Wade, nice to see you. This is
You
Emily
too.
Walters with the Lipstick Pickup. I'm calling my old friend Wade Cofer today. We've known each other since 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
In a minute, I'm going to explain to the listener how I met Wade. I have been installing some sympathetic strings, and there are people that enrich the conversation of Dan Electro, Masonite guitars, lipstick pickups. And today I've tracked down a guy named Wade Cofer, which is who we're talking to today. And I first heard about him in the late winter or early spring. I made a recording with local blues man Patrick Sweeney, and he's a longtime friend of mine, and I wanted to talk to him about tone because he knows something about it.
Yeah.
And we made a recording about his vintage Dan Electro Explorer amp. And I also wanted to lend him my Jerry Jones electric sitar to see what he would do with it because I was finding it on some contemporary blues. And I just, I called it a publicity stunt. At some point in our conversation, he took out a guitar, which a layman like me, who I'm not a musician, recognizes as a telly.
Right. Yeah.
My dumb ass knows what a telly is. But I noticed it had I call it banding, and I'm going to ask you,
hmm
this way you finish the edges out on a Masonite guitar, what do you call that?
Well, the stuff that I use isn't necessarily the same stuff that they used. It's just sort of
Okay.
the closest available material, which is it's just Tolex like you would find on an amplifier.
Okay.
It's just white instead of black.
And does it come on a roll? What is it
hmm
made of? I see that it has a lot of strength and tensile quality
Yeah.
because of the way, I know something about fabric. It's not materials, I like to inspect them. And what when you call it what you're putting there, do you call it the edging, the
Yeah. I mean, I just call it like the Tolex app, I guess. I
yeah,
honestly don't really have a specific name for it.
okay.
But it's just made out of vinyl,
Yeah.
and it has sort of an adhesive backing.
Hmm.
And you can buy it. You can really cut it to any length or width that you need for your application.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes in a little roll, and yeah,
I feel better for not having official word for it if you don't, because you know how to
yeah,
use it. It's just using that word banding. I know something a
yeah.
little bit about sewing, and I'm just attempting to articulate what it does there on the edges. So Patrick pulls this out, and he's really he wants to talk about this guitar, and anybody's got something that they love and want to talk about, I'm like, let's break it out. And I said, I've seen you with that before, and now that I'm becoming knowledgeable about Masonite guitars, I'm learning how to recognize them as
hmm
as opposed to you can't always do it, but as opposed to a solid, telly or whatever. And so he wanted to tell me all about it, and he plugged it in, not to his Explorer, but he did a little demo and he wanted to tell me why he loves it. And it was kind of a reboot of the Dan Electro, the vintage instruments. It's tone.
hmm
We love to use the word sustain, but it does.
Yeah,
It sustains.
yeah. There's lots of little, sort of guitar nerd words that are have come become cliche at this point, but we all
But
kind of
they
know what they mean, but they don't really have a meaning.
I mean, it's a good word, and of course, I was exposed to it. This is Spinal Tap, but it is still a word to describe what happens
Yeah.
with that instrument. And he wanted me to know what all he loves about it, and one of them is that it's lightweight,
hmm
which is a good thing for everybody.
Sure.
And especially if you're a road guy,
hmm
the road is hard on people, it's hard on instruments, it's hard on your neck and all this other stuff. I have a friend who is a guitar player, and he's been that way for years, and now most of his custom instruments are about making it lighter. And
Yeah.
his name is Eric Amble, If you don't know who he is, look him up. Anyway, he sent me a rundown. He knows what every one of his guitars weighs now
Oh yeah.
because he's had some nerve sciatic, some he routinely had issues with spinal stuff, and he has to be careful about what everything weighs. And that's one of the wonderful things about it too. It's lighter,
Yeah.
and I think it's an important few pounds too. It's the difference between, man, I'm tired, and you know. I mean, do you talk about that much with your customers about weight of the guitar?
It depends on the customer. Some people are really, really concerned about that, you know. I have people that reach out, like if I post a guitar that I've built on Instagram, for instance, I'll have people that will send me a message and just say, what does it weigh? You know, not like, what does it sound like? How does it feel? You know, how much does it weigh? So it's super important to some people for sure. Um,
They're looking for a lower figure, or is this sometimes
yeah,
what? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, I think probably in the 70s and well, probably 70s, you wanted a heavier, most people wanted a heavy guitar because that they thought that translated to
Mm-hmm.
tone and sustain, right? And now it's sort of the opposite of that. So
Yeah. Conventional approaches to things normally at the offset are wrong. History will usually bear out the differences between that. So,
well, I mean, honestly, not to go off on that too much, but I think it's not necessarily that it's wrong. I think it's that they're both right. You know,
yeah, meaning it's not always essential to it, but
well,
it can,
tone is subjective. You
yeah,
know, that's the most important thing about tone is that there's not just one good tone. You know, it's all good. It just
yeah.
depends on if
What
you think it
tone
is
you
or you
like?
know.
What tone you
It's
like?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. I did an episode on the PVT 60. Do you know this guitar?
Yeah, that like those are the real heavy ones. They're made out of
Yes.
oak, I think.
Yeah. And I'm from
Yeah.
Mississippi. Again, we're going to get into the Masonite thing, but a
Hmm.
friend of mine who had one wanted to talk to me about it, and it came out in 78 or 79. And I think just looking at it, it's not only really heavy, they wanted it to look heavy. Like
Hmm.
the way they did the pick guard around it looks like rivets. And you can
Yeah.
tell that they were really, even the case on it looks like a heavy duty road case. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it was very much of the time. Patrick was loving everything about his guitar, and he wanted to tell me. And at the time, I thought, wait, Cofer, Nashville, you've been here how many years?
Next, I've been here 9 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, almost a decade. And
Yeah.
sometimes we could have actually met in person at some point. It's entirely possible,
Sure.
especially if you played with this person and that person. It's a big city, and you can't know everybody. And the name sounded familiar to me, but he spoke so highly of you, as a person, but also your workmanship. And then
That's
just a
sweet.
few, yeah, way to go, Patrick. I love that guy. He's a great
Yeah.
cheerleader. A community leader is what I told him.
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah.
I consider him a community leader. Uh, and then a couple of days after that, I was at Carter Vintage, and they had one of your guitars there, and I felt like I was hot stuff. I was like, I know about this guitar. It looks like a Telly, but it's made. And I actually was talking to my friend Gary. I told you I know Gary Bohannon, and he was
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
with the new owner. I
Hmm.
can't remember his name. Anyway, I said, that's a Masonite. I said, I like that guitar. And he goes, that's not I said, I know what it is. It's a Masonite guitar. And I went over and
Yeah.
checked it out. I could recognize it. And I don't know if you know what that was. And then Matthew Page brought your name up again. And I said, I got to talk to this gentleman because I've been on this quest. This lipstick pickup podcast is relatively new. I've been on this intellectual pursuit for about 3 years, and I've been. My favorite thing now is to go into guitar shops and learn things and be nice and respectful to people. By the way, people always told me you'll be treated like this and that, and I was like, I found that if you go in there and tell them, I mean, you get what you give. And I've been treated nicely in guitar shops, and I've learned a lot there, but I have yet to talk to luthier.
Right.
And
Um,
I didn't even know what that word meant when I started learning about Dan Electro guitars. I did.
some of us still don't know what it really means.
I, I'm thrilled to talk to you. I've got tons of questions for you. I'm going to pelt you with questions. Sustain, that is a word that Pat used, he wanted to use over and over again to describe what happens. And I know that's about the pickups too. I want to talk to you about pickups
Okay.
also. But I asked you when we did a pregame this week, and I said I want to call you 5 minutes just to tell you what I'm hoping to achieve. And I wanted to know about your artistic pursuits here. And you told me why you moved here with your band. And I asked
Hmm.
you what they were named, and they were named. Are they still together, by the way? In any?
No,
Okay.
no. The band was called Somebody's Darling.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I want to
Mm.
tell you, Wade, I went to Spotify, which is the devil, but it also means I've got something at my fingertips.
Sure, yeah.
And I really love this band. I want to tell you,
Oh, cool.
I am born and raised in Mississippi, and when something is described as Southern blues rock, I like to tell people I'm no critic, but I do have
But
a right to my opinion. I have some credibility.
yeah, absolutely.
I grew up and I was born in '67. That makes me an authority on Southern blues rock. I've been
Yeah.
around it, and I love this band.
Oh, thank you.
I
Glad you
uh,
liked it.
I listened to Jank City, Shakedown,
Shakedown. Yeah.
and Adult Roommates, and they're
Yeah.
both great records and
Thanks.
very classic and also not easily described. Who wrote all the songs? The singer?
The singer Amber and the guitar player David were the primary songwriters. Our keyboard player Michael also wrote some of those songs.
They're
Um,
solid songs, and you were the bass player.
yeah.
Did you always play bass in that band?
In that, well, technically yes. I, I I I went to school and played drums my whole life. Went to school for drums, and I there was several gigs where I would have to fill in for the drummer if he had something else going on. So I would move over to drums, and the keyboard player Michael, who was the previous bass player before I joined the band, would move back over to bass, and you know, so technically yes, but there was a few instances where I
I
played
bet
drums in
you
my
were
band.
a very valued member of that band. I pulled up I watched some stuff on YouTube and I really enjoyed it. And I also read this write up of a performance that y'all did at Hill Country Barbecue in New York City.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've seen a few shows in that venue, so I have a feel for the place, which is why I read this review.
Hmm.
And do you remember playing the Hill Country Barbecue?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we played there several times, and I played there a bunch of other times with other people too.
I dug that
Um,
place. I still
yeah,
dig it.
I mean, it was great as a road band because especially in New York City. There's another one in DC, but
Hmm.
playing that one in the city is great because you get like a nice meal,
And the
and
food is very good there. The food is
yeah,
solid.
yeah,
Sometimes when a place has so many things going on, they'll phone this in, and the food is incredible. I had a few great meals there, and I saw some great shows there, mostly in the Americana, genre. But I love it, and
hmm,
then the feeling that you go down into the basement.
yeah, yeah,
You got the low ceiling up there, and it kind of feels like a sticky black floor and not a big corporate
yeah.
entity, which it
And
probably is. But
I want to say there's a giant denim Texas flag or something behind the stage.
yeah,
Does that sound right?
yeah,
Or
sounds
like
right.
like patchwork denim Texas flag, I think, if I'm
Yeah,
remembering correctly.
food is solid, and so I read this write up, and it said in the beginning they come in and they say while the voice of Amber Ferris started off the night somewhat smooth and reserved, carefully waiting for Wade Cofer to get his bass pounding.
Oh goodness.
That's when I read it. I was like, he's a bass player. I
Uh,
just assumed when we spoke that you were a guitar player, and I mean it's a bass guitar, but
well,
now finding out that you,
not to like. anything about bass players, but I was, in retrospect, I feel like I was always sort of a reluctant bass player.
Aren't they all?
Well,
Just
yeah, you might
kidding.
be right about it. It was never like my primary thing that I'd like to focus. Like I've always been a guitar player. That was my first instrument since I was a little kid, and bass is kind of one of those things I started doing around Dallas because everybody needed one. I was like, I'll do it. I'll make the $50 or whatever for the gig tonight.
So
And
many
it,
guitar players. We need more bass players. Is that how you?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was just there. There was always, it seemed like there was always a bass gig that somebody needed to do. So I just started doing it, and it kind of snowballed.
Interesting. Did you play any Dan Electro basses when you were with them? Was that something that you?
Not with them, but I did later. So we moved here and toured pretty heavily for about a year and kind of wore ourselves out. And then uh, I started playing with a few other people, and I ended up playing with this band here in town called Creamer.
Mm,
Great band,
I've seen
Philip
them.
Creamer,
Hmm.
really amazing singer and songwriter, super talented guy. But we went out and did some shows with Wilco,
Mm.
and on that run, I played a Dan Electro shorthorn bass. Is now it's been converted into a baritone guitar, so it's no
I
longer a
hear
bass.
I hear this kind of thing, in guitar shops. They'll say that this Dano was this and now it's that. That's
Hmm.
interesting to me. Do you remember why you made that choice at the time, or was it just
The choice to play it or the choice to
yeah that
convert it?
short horn to that short horn? Why you made that choice with that entity, Creamer?
Well, I didn't have any bass equipment anymore. I had sworn off bass entirely. I sold all my stuff, and I had kind
It
of
got
told
you
my
back in.
well, yeah, I told myself like there's really only one situation or group that I would ever really play bass for again, and it was for Philip. And
Okay.
he called, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm doing this. But I didn't have anything. My friend Michael Zimmerman, who's a great bass player here in town, among other things, he's a great drummer and guitar player too. I knew that he had that short horn, and he wasn't really using it, so I just kind of called him and said, hey man, what are you doing with that thing? And he sold it to me,
How
and
old
that's where
was it? That one, was it a reissue?
no, it was an old one. It was early
Oh,
'60s. It was a real short horn, so that's the reason why a lot of people, myself included, convert those to baritone guitars is because the ones from the early '60s, the scale length is I think it's like 28 inches or something, which is
mm-hmm.
for a bass is really really short. For a
Hmm.
guitar, it's a little long, so it kind of falls right in the middle. And with a few pretty, elementary sort of modifications, you can turn them into a really cool baritone guitar.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't play music at all, which is probably why I enjoy this chat so much, meaning this subject, because I don't have to get bogged down in building guitars or anything like that. I can focus on the music, and I'm more interested in the reason why people made choices more than anything. And did it surprise you how much you enjoyed playing that Dan Electro bass? Or
Uh, I wouldn't say it was surprising. I've always liked those things. The thing about Philip's music and whole sort of vibe, to use a sort of cliche, is like, I wanted a bass that like looked super cool,
mm-hmm.
and like fit the aesthetic. That was part of it, and I knew, yeah, exactly, and I knew it was going to sound good. Um,
It looks super cool. I mean, Dan Electro's look super cool.
yeah, this one had been painted metallic green
I
on the
love that.
front. The back was still copper, but the front had been painted metallic green, and I think that it's still around. It's sort of still in the family somewhere around town. I
I'm going to
forget who
see
has
it
it.
one day, and I'm going to be so excited that I
Yeah,
know
you'll see it.
the pedigree. This is another thing I love about Dan Electro's, and I think you being a musician and a luthier will appreciate. I love it when I find ones that are original, but I also love the way people rip the hell out of them over the years because they weren't expensive. So
Right.
they would be more sacrilegious about things like, I don't know how many times somebody goes, here's my, this is my, and I spray painted it yellow.
Yeah.
It's like, people did what they want to with them because they weren't expensive.
Yeah.
Guitars,
Totally.
I like this kind of interesting. This one I just held up, which is a short horn guitar. It's got an added pickup to
Hmm.
it, and just lots of things that people did. That's awesome. I didn't know anything about that. I want to tell you, when I went to go find out more about you as a luthier, I went to the YouTubes and I found a nearly new post by the guitarist JD Simo, who I met
Yeah.
met briefly once. I
Hmm.
ran it. Well, I've been introduced to him twice through Pat, and but I've seen him perform a bunch, so I know exactly who he is. He did a YouTube video about 30 days ago, and he wants to talk about his Wade Cofer guitars because he's got a few. I didn't watch the whole thing. I don't know how many he has.
Well, right now I guess he's technically has one right now. He's
Okay.
he he's always been a champion of sort of my guitars, and I'm super grateful for that. He's been super kind and gracious and complimentary publicly about my stuff, which is really amazing. The one he has now is sort of the prototype of my personal design that I have come up with. That's kind of like my guitar that I make. It's not a copy of something else, you know.
Your signature. What
Yeah.
is it? What is this called? Was it the number? He said a
Uh,
number 17. I don't know what you name your guitar. So what do you call your guitar that is your Cofer guitar? What do you
well,
call it?
it doesn't really have an individual name. You know what I mean? I haven't like
Okay.
named it. I just
Okay.
call them Cofer guitars. You know, they have my name on them. Maybe I should come up with a name.
Hey, it worked for
uh,
Fender.
yeah, you're right.
It's a Fender. But I mean,
Yeah,
you know how sometimes I'll have a model or something like one of the
yeah. I don't have a
luthiers.
model name.
Okay.
I've thought about it. Uh, Obviously not very long, but maybe I should. But yeah, the one he has is essentially is the first one that I ever built. It's a prototype, I guess. For in hindsight, I guess it's a prototype.
What is it
Um,
made out of? What is that guitar made out of?
it's made out of mahogany. It's
Okay.
a solid one piece mahogany body and a one piece mahogany neck. It's a bolt-on guitar, meaning like the neck bolts onto the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that one is a very heavy guitar. Mahogany is a heavy wood.
Mm-hmm.
But that one, we've sort of set it up as his baritone that he uses a
Oh,
lot.
okay.
Um,
Excellent. And even the term baritone guitar as just a civilian is what I like to call myself. I'm a civilian. I don't play
that's what
it.
I
I don't
that's
I don't review it. I
sure.
can't do anything for you. Nothing. I'm just a music lover. I call it a civilian. Now that I'm coming to learn what a baritone guitar is, I just love the whole idea of it and what
Yeah.
people have been able to do with this arrangement of a
Hmm.
baritone guitar with just two people or replay and it's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
He had an interesting new articulation for this thing we call disdain. He said, quote, notes hang on around for a long time on your guitar.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's a great way to describe it for sure.
Thank you, JD Simon. Notes
Yeah.
hang around for a long time. I guess if you want them to.
Yeah. It's only good if that's what you want.
I want to. So anyway, it was only 16 minutes long, but he speaks lovingly of how much he loves your friendship, and
Yeah.
it's all. And people love to watch JD Samo play guitar. Go watch him play a Cofer guitar. It's pretty
Yeah.
good. He's very talented. I'm sure that must be the ultimate compliment, if you're a musician, to have other musicians go, way to go, because not all musicians know how to make instruments,
That's true.
and not all people who know how to make
Yeah,
instruments are
play.
musicians.
Yeah, that's also very true.
And Nathan Daniel, who founded the Dan Electro Company, didn't know how to play a note. Did you know that?
Well, Leo Fender didn't know how to play guitar,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, it's not one of
It's
those things that's super necessary, but I honestly, I think it as from somebody that fixes, I mean, most of my income comes from fixing them,
mm-hmm,
I'm a predominantly a repair
mm-hmm,
guy. I build mostly for the love and joy of it,
mm-hmm.
Um, maybe someday I'll be able to make a little bit more money doing it. But from the perspective of a repair guy and a builder, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really helpful and important to be a player as well.
Yeah,
Because otherwise you have no frame of reference, like
yeah.
you just
Well,
don't.
these titans of business, Fender, they had to consult guitar players. That's why the stories are so interesting. The people that they had to bring in,
Yeah,
they had to bring in the Wade Cofers of the world. But the fact that they knew who to pick is something in itself. And I want to say this whole thing, your your service business, that makes you like so many other manufacturers in this country. Most auto manufacturers really don't make money on cars anymore.
right.
They make money in the service shop.
Yeah,
I used to be in the vacuum cleaner business, oddly enough, true story. And we made most of our profit in service because really, if you think about what you're able to do for people, it's the thing that is so valued. I mean, I know people come to you in tears sometimes. Fix this for me. I need it ready by this or that. It's important work,
sure.
and you being able to do it, I'm just opining now. Jerry Jones, who made those beautiful reproductions of Dan Electro's here in town, are you familiar with his workmanship, Jerry Jones?
Absolutely, yeah.
He was a guitar repair man, and just like you, he put he pulled one in among other things, not just your Masonite guitars, but he's when he took them apart, he goes, if I ever want to build one, it's going to be like this. So it was about his acumen as a repairman and understanding how he can improve upon it too.
Yeah, it's repairs. It gives you a lot of insight when it comes
Yeah.
to um, design, really.
Do
You
you know
know,
all the electrical stuff? Or are you one of these people that people say I need to bring it to? Um, I mean, because there's so many components to a guitar.
oh yeah, that's only part of it. It's a very important part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I do a lot of wiring and yeah, that's definitely a big part of it.
I think Mr. Simo said that you make your own pickups. I know you don't probably
Mhm.
make all the ones you work with when you build guitars, but that you make your own pickups. Tell me about that. I only know about lipstick pickups, but it means that I'm able to understand the other kinds of pickups. Tell me about the pickups that you make.
Well, I it's kind of a rabbit hole, like
I've got a podcast devoted to it called the lipstick pickup,
yeah, I
meaning
know.
the subject of pickups.
Yeah, totally.
So
Pickups.
take me down a little short one.
Pickups, the thing that I tell people, because there's so many different types of pickups and they all sound, there's a whole spectrum of the way pickups sound, right? Um, and the interesting thing about that is that each pickup really only has like four ingredients and two of them are the same, right?
You
Pickups,
mean wire or
wire.
okay?
There's, so you have a pickup basically is com comprised of a magnet
Mm-hmm.
and copper. Actually, I can show you. This is pickup wire right here, right? This is a
Oh,
spool
cool.
of 44 gauge pickup wire, which is what you would find in like a gold foil or something like that. There's different gauges and thicknesses. They're they're thinner than a human hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're wound around something thousands of times around a magnet, generally. So you have your magnet, you have your wire, right? And then you have your size of wire and your number of winds of that wire. So it's like you have kind of four ingredients, but three of them are the same thing. Now you have any number of different types of magnet that you can use that also will affect the sound and the tone.
I
Um,
learned how to pronounce Alnico.
yeah, there's different alloys of magnet, right? So it's a rabbit hole. It's like I'm not joking when I say like I've laid awake at night thinking about like pickup formulas and how to make something sound a certain way, you know.
I can
So
imagine.
that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question, I think.
What type of pickup have you been most creative with? And when I say type, you know what I mean, the big kinds of humbucker, peanut, lipstick. What kind of pickup have you been the most creative with?
Well, I tried to. There was a period of time where I was trying to develop a set of pickups that would essentially sound like the pickups in the Cooter guitar, which is
Right? Is it Rycooter?
Ry Cooter's guitar,
Oh,
right? So sort of a famous
all right.
amongst guitar players, right?
I'm gonna have
And
to look this up because I'm a big fan.
yeah,
Um,
me
and
too.
he plays a lot of guitars. So he's played a lot of them over the years. So when one is
Right.
really notable, yeah,
So
I have to look.
his Cooter, which has been and copied and emulated, infinite times over at this point. It's I want to say it's a late '60s Strat,
Hmm.
right? And he's famously a tinkerer, like many of us are. But it's a Strat with a mid '60s Tiesco gold foil pickup in the neck position and a late '50s Valco lap steel pickup, Supro Valco lap steel pickup in the bridge position.
Oh my goodness, I get it.
And if you've ever seen him play with the Stratocaster that has the sort of tortoiseshell pick guard and the weird looking pickups, that's the Cootercaster, right?
Ah,
So I've made a few of those over the years, and the thing that was always tricky about them is that lap steel pickup, the strings. I can actually show you this
yeah, I'd love to
if you're
see it.
interested. Hang on one sec.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I've seen him record. I've seen him live a few times. I saw Little Village back in the day. That's how old I am.
That's cool. So this is
Major admirer.
not
He's
a
got some
Cootercaster.
history. I think.
No, it's okay. This is the pickup, right? So this is what he would have robbed out of another lap steel. It's the same. This is a '50s Oahu lap steel, but were made by the same company,
Yeah.
Valco. And so you can kind of see that the strings go through the pickup, right? It's kind of,
Uh-huh.
can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that this is like your guitar. You have to play this, and now you have to kind of get your hand around this pickup to get to the strings, because the strings go through the middle of it, and it's just sort of, you know, cumbersome and uncomfortable. But that's a big part of the way it sounds. The way it sounds, it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of um, the magnets on that pickup are outside of the pickup, right? So
Mm.
actually, I'll show you. So you see, there's this sort of plate on top.
Mm-hmm.
There's these two things that the plate rests on.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the magnets.
Mm.
That's a magnet, and that's a magnet, right? Normally, the magnet on a pickup would be internal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because of that, it creates what's called a diffuse magnetic field, right? The strings go through the magnetic field as opposed to sit on top of it, right? Um, so I tried to develop a pickup that would sound like that, but not be as difficult to sort of, navigate. So I went down that rabbit hole for a long time.
Did you get
And
where you wanted? I'm curious.
yeah,
Did you
yeah, I got really
achieve?
close.
Yeah.
Got really close. I actually wanted JD's got a couple of guitars that I didn't build, but I wound the pickups for that have that. So I made a set that has they're the size of a Gibson Mini humbucker,
Mm-hmm.
but one of them is a lap steel like that, or sounds like that, and the other one is my version of a gold foil, but it's hum canceling. Both pickups are actually hum canceling. So again, another long-winded answer to your
No,
question,
the
but
pickup thing, it really is meaningful. That was a fun part of my intellectual pursuit, is to discover that these things really do make a difference.
yeah,
This whole gear talk thing is interesting because actually these things really do make a difference. They really do make a difference, and that's why lipstick pickups have their own unique sound.
they're going to sound, and you just don't know until you try it, you know.
The
Um,
best intellectual point of view is a scientific approach. Try it, try
yeah,
it, try it, and
yeah.
that's learning great stuff. So I get the whole pickup thing. Now I know that you do all this repair work and you're wanting pickups. And to me, you customizing somebody's guitar is the same thing as building one. Now that I'm learning, about that, well, it's just like, it's a simple thing. You've got this many components, and these are the things that you can do that really change it. And if you take a caster or anything, you put that pickup in it, it's no longer that, it's this.
Hmm.
Like when you made the Telecaster that was a Masonite. Do you work with lipstick pickups in any of your custom stuff? Have you done any kind of lipstick pickup conversions?
I mean, I've put lipstick pickups in. I think one of the guitars I've made. I made a Masonite 12 string, basically like my copy of a Dan Electro 12 string, for a buddy of mine, Matty Alger is his name. He's a great musician and owns a studio over here on the east side. But I made him a really cool single cut foam green 12 string, Masonite 12 string that we put lipsticks in.
What does the shape look like? No, I mean,
Um,
if you were to describe it as a shape, what would you say the shape was?
I mean, I bought a template for like a single cut Dan Electro
Oh,
guitar.
okay. Yeah.
So it looks exactly like that. The only difference being the headstock. I used, if you've ever seen the Fender electric 12 strings and
Yes.
acoustic 12 strings from the 60s, they
Mm-hmm.
have that sort of, they call them Smurf hat headstock.
I never
Looks like
heard
kind of
that
like a
word, but
hockey
I know
stick.
you're. Yeah,
I put a reverse Smurf headstock
it's
on there.
it's very pretty. It's
Yeah.
kind of fancy.
Hmm.
I love that somebody would want you to build a 12-string guitar for them, because now that I'm talking to more musicians about playing 12-string, I had a great chat about my Belzuki with our mutual friend Matthew Page yesterday,
Yeah, yeah.
about how problematic 12 strings can be to tour with them and do all these
Hmm.
things with them, and that somebody would come to you and go, I need you to solve some problems for me.
Yep.
Which is what Nathan Daniel was. I've talked to his son, and he wants me to know that his dad was a problem solver, is what, and that his shielding thing, the whole shielding thing. Do you know? I'm
Yep.
sure you know what I
Oh yeah.
mean when I say that.
Hmm.
But so I want to hear about your history of. So you make out of all these things. Tell me about you making guitars out of Masonite. When you decided to make that choice, and that's
Uh,
not your signature thing. You've made them, but I want to hear about your affection for it and why you've used it and your thoughts about it. And I want to hear from a modern luthier about why this is a cool material to make guitars out of.
well, it was my first choice. Actually, the Masonite Telecaster that Pat Sweeney plays is the first guitar I ever made. It's the first
Oh.
guitar I ever built. Um,
Okay. JD Sama's saying he's got your first one. Just
well,
kidding.
that's the first one I ever designed.
Oh, okay. I see.
Right. Um,
Semantics.
yeah, the first of my own personal design. JD has that one.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
the first guitar I ever, was like, I'm going to build a guitar. Like that's the one that Pat has.
Okay.
Um, and I chose Masonite. I've always been a fan of Masonite guitars. I grew up in Dallas, and out of high school, I started doing a lot of studio work, most like jingle work, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I had a buddy that was a jingle writer and producer, and that was like my first post high school gig was playing on like McDonald's commercials, right? And
Dallas
um,
would have been a great place to do that, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
big business in that during that time.
Yeah.
This is sort of post the first, you know, 2008 recession kind of deal. Before that, you could make a living playing guitar on jingles,
I believe it.
Um, but it seemed like every studio I went into had a Dan Electro on the wall. You know, I didn't necessarily see a lot of people playing them out, but every studio I went to had a Dan Electro or a Silvertone or some kind of Masonite guitar, and
Do
they'd
you
always be
think
like,
it
"Oh
was
yeah, man."
there? Do you think it was there because it had been there so long? In that some of these studios had been in this business for so long that they had them. I mean, what is your opinion about why they were there?
A few things.
Okay.
A lot of them were people's first guitar, right?
Gotcha.
It was a lot of people's first guitar because it was the cheap option back in the
Mm-hmm.
day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they sort of later realized, like, wow, these things, you'll hear this a lot, right? They do a thing, right? Those guitars do a thing, meaning like they have a unique sound that can't really be replicated by some other sort of, mainstream guitar like a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The Masonite with the lipstick, it's its own thing, right? So I always liked those guitars. Um, I like old things generally, old guitars, old motorcycles, old cars, right?
Old
Um,
stuff.
Old stuff.
Built to
And
last.
yeah, and so when I kind of got old enough to go out on my own, and in high school, and after that, and looking at stuff and looking at cool old guitars and trying to figure out what was actually attainable, that stuff was like kind of the only stuff I could even conceivably afford, right? So I always just kind of had like a sort of a soft spot for that stuff. Uh, Jump forward many, many years. I got out here and honestly I'd always been tinkering on guitars and had a sort of like a dream of someday being able to build one.
Mm-hmm.
But I got out here, and honestly, the reason I really started focusing on it is because I quit drinking, and I needed something to like focus on. So for the first time in my whole life, I had like time and money and actual like mental capacity to focus on something. And
Amazing.
so I was surfing eBay like I've done my whole life since the 90s, and this listing popped up of this guy was selling. I actually might still have some, honestly. This dude was selling pre-cut Telecaster shaped plates made out of masonite. Build your own guitar out of masonite. It was like the listing, right? So, and it was
Wow.
cheap. It was like $50 or something. So that's what Pat's guitar is made out of. I bought these pre-cut Telecaster shaped plates out of masonite that you essentially like. That's all you get is just those. It's a top and a back. Right?
Do you think it was somebody making them for the that for that purpose to say, "Hey, I'm building this," like they had a shop and they go, "Here, you can just like you can buy all of these components, you buy components." Or was it somebody who had a bunch that was getting out of a business? Do you remember? Or is it just somebody?
No, it was definitely it was for that purpose. It was
Gotcha.
like I don't think. I mean, it had to have been a sort of a passion project. I don't think they're getting rich off of that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was somebody just like, hey, this will be cool. We'll put them out there,
Mm-hmm.
and and maybe help some people out. And it was, I had no idea what I was doing. I improvised the whole thing. Basically, I think I bought a pine body blank off of eBay and just started, like, at the time I was single, living in a duplex, and I made that guitar in my spare bedroom. I didn't have a bandsaw. I don't, like I didn't have anything. I think I made that whole guitar with a drill press, with different attachments.
Nathan Daniel started his business on a bench in his bedroom.
Yeah,
Yeah. He was started building amps, but it just got, it's the same thing. Humble beginnings.
yeah, and that was it. Really, it was like, sort of opportunity presented itself in a way, and I was like, yeah, why not? I'll try it. What's the worst that can happen? Down the rabbit hole we continue to go until now.
What year was that? Yeah, well, you said
Um,
it was when you first moved here, so that would be 10 years ago.
that was I built Pat's guitar. That would have been probably 2018.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
not terribly long ago.
So you worked at the service department at Carter,
Hmm.
and everybody knows who Carter is. I found now that I'm around the guitar world, go to guitar shop place at Carter. It's becoming
Sure.
synonymous with Nashville. How did you get that job? And how long did you do that? I know that was a very important job because they have a massive service department. They did and they still do, and how
Yeah,
did you get
absolutely.
that
Like,
gig?
super sort of prestigious place to end up in
Yeah.
this line of work.
Mm,
And honestly, that was like my only real goal when I started doing repairs. Like, I'm gonna get a job at Carter's one of these days, right?
mm,
So basically, what happened? I was a touring musician up until the shutdown. That was my
mm,
primary focus in life since I was 15.
mm.
Is being a player on the road. And so when the shutdown happened, you know, it provided an opportunity to try other things for everybody. Like, I've said this a lot of times, and it kind of
Opportunity
feels
is a great word when you frame it positively. This is a
right.
shot. You could have looked at it as it's an opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well,
Continue
yeah,
on.
and I've said this to a lot of people, and I feel this way, although I'm like, uh, it may sound a little insensitive to some, but I feel like that year, even though everything was crazy and it was awful in a lot of ways, it was probably the best year of my whole life. You know, because what other opportunity are we going to have to just stop? Spend time with your family and your love. What I mean. Your people that you're close with. Stop running and chasing whatever you're chasing. And like, for me personally, it gave me an opportunity to stay home for a year and buy a bunch of tools because it was also the first time, much like the rest of the people that were touring musicians beforehand. It's the first time any of us had any money in our pocket, right? A bunch of tools and got my 10,000 hours in, you know, and learned how to
So
do this
what does
other
that
thing.
mean? 10,000 hours? Did you do some learning or?
Well, that's just sort of like I guess a concept where people say, like, you have to, before you become a professional in
Gotcha.
anything, you have to put in your 10,000 hours of
Gotcha.
learning and practice
Hmm.
and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So during that shutdown, I started doing my own thing and fixing stuff and building stuff. And I started picking up clients, repair clients, right? And I found out about a luthier school, a trade school here in Nashville, and they were still conducting classes during the shutdown, sort of
What is the
socially
name
distanced.
of this school? I've heard it before, but I want the listener to know what is the name of this school.
It's called the Musicians Institute Guitar Craft Academy, and it's a subsidiary of the Musicians Institute in LA. It's an accredited trade school, so you can get financial aid and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Hmm.
a cool program. So I went and did that during the shutdown. And my instructors, the great Dave Johnson, who's a very well-known luthier and repair guy here in Nashville, as well as around the country, and most likely the world. Dave Johnson. I call him my luthier sensei. He's is
Original influencers.
yeah. Dave is a real deal dude in this field for sure. And he kind of took me under his wing a little bit and invited me to come work with him in his personal home shop that he works out of. And after a few days of that, you know, he had previously worked at Gruhn's and Carter's before going out on his own. And after a few days of working with Dave, he basically turned to me and he was like, "Hey man, you want to work at Carter's?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So meet me there on Saturday. So we went up there and he basically walked me in the front door and introduced me to Walter Carter, and I started the next Saturday, you know. So that's how I started working at
Amazing.
Carter's.
He endorsed you, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
endorsed you and said, "Yeah, fabulous."
I think they were also
And
they needed somebody real bad.
there's been a lot of changes there over the years, and I'm aware of some of them.
Yeah,
I've loved to go in there over the years, and that's another place I could have met you, Wade. I used to love to go
sure.
in there with. I used. I have many friends in music, which is why some people think I might be pro on any level. They're also just my friends. The reason why they're my friends is I've been going to see them live forever, and
Yeah.
I like to take some of my buddies from out of town in there, and I went in there. I brought Eric Campbell in there one day, and I was standing at the service department. I just like the scene. You know, it's not that I want to
Yeah.
pick up anything. I just like the scene. And David Grissom. Do you know who? You're from
Mm-hmm.
Texas. You know who David
Yeah, yeah.
Grissom is?
Sure.
He comes walking in there, and I used to see him back with Joe Ely back in the day, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is why I like to hang out in guitar shops.
Yeah.
He
Carter's is
comes
a pretty unique place in that regard, you know, like you never know who's gonna walk through the door.
I knew exactly what he has a very distinctive head of hair
Mm-hmm.
and tone. That's a guy who knows something about tone too. He's known for those
Sure.
PRS guitars, but
Yeah.
anyway, I recognized him. I'd seen him perform live over the years, and there I am. I said, "David Grissom," and I met him because you can't miss him.
Yeah.
Anyway, I met him that day. So that's amazing. So you worked at Carter from then, which was what year would that have been?
I think I started there. I mean, we were still wearing masks, you know,
Oh, okay.
when I started there. So, I guess that was, I'm so bad with years, honestly.
Yeah, and
It's embarrassing.
especially you've had a lot going on, and we've all had, and it's especially the last 4 years since the pandemic. It's like, what year was that? My husband will
Yeah.
say, "What day?" I'll say, "What day is?" And he'll go, "I'll say, is it Wednesday?" And he'll go, "Sure."
Yeah.
So but now you're not working there anymore. But probably the time you did there was in great preparation for running your own repair business right now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I worked there until I was probably, it was almost a year ago now is when I left. And I still do work for them. Occasionally they call me to help out on some things, and you know, I still uh, have a good relationship with all those guys, which is great. But yeah, absolutely. Like from a repair guy's perspective, there's not really many places where you'll get your hands on the kind of stuff that you get your hands on at Carter's. You know, I've worked on. I mean, with this is no exaggeration. I've worked on guitars that are worth more than my house. You know, lots of all the big ones, the '59 Les Pauls and the first year Strats, and you know, celebrity guitars, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Um,
Carter has gotten so well known. I'm sure when these change hands, they give them the first, just like a Sotheby's. Call them. You got something, you know. I'm sure they get a lot of first dibs on things changing hands. At least the celebrity owned stuff. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
sure. Yeah, we would get collections oftentimes. Like if a notable player had passed, the spouse would maybe not immediately, but like eventually we would get collection. I remember we got Danny Gatton's collection, which was really cool. We got Hank Garland's collection. We got
Hmm.
Leon Rose. A lot of cool historical pieces came through there.
I love to just go in there, and when I started learning, well, you're a Texas guy. Stevie Ray Vaughan has had a lot of strats that he customized with lipstick pickups. Did you know
Hmm.
that about
Sure, I
him?
got I got one.
You have one? Yeah.
Yeah, hold on, I'll show you something. This is interesting, actually.
You being a Texas boy, I could probably talk about music, even though we're, a generation separated. It's not like you're that much younger than me, but we're a generation separated. But you being from Texas, I could probably talk to you about all kinds of stuff. All
Sure.
right, let's see
So
that.
the
Is that
Charlies.
headstock that you were talking about? Yeah, it's
So
groovy.
Stevie's lipstick strat was a Charlie's strat. Charlie's
Oh,
Guitar
yes,
Shop,
in Dallas,
Dallas.
right?
This is a
Yeah.
Charlie's neck
Hmm.
for a lipstick strap. Yeah, Charlie's is one of those places like if you're from Dallas, like it's a pretty historic guitar shop.
They're cultural centers. Now that I like to go to shops, I love to go to New York and San Francisco, and I sometimes like to go to the library, to the art museum, to the food
Yeah,
hall, because this is where you find out what's going on in the city. And guess what happens in guitar shops? They are cultural places. Some of them
yeah.
are known for cheap guitars. The Subway Guitars in Berkeley. Do you know this guitar shop?
I don't know that one.
It's a
Um,
fascinating one. People either know everything about it or nothing, but he's done a
hmm.
bunch of stuff over the years for people like Mark Knopfler. And his ethos is cheap guitars. His name is Fat Dog. He changed his name legally to Fat Dogs. And his battle cry when he opened his shop in 1969 was guitars for the proletariat. And
Nice.
that's why he's always
Yeah,
bought a lot of overstock and things in the lipstick pickup Masonite realm. Whenever he sees an opportunity to buy things, he's bought things, and he's got things in there that are butchered up pieces of everything. And it was a visit to that guitar shop is why I decided I had to have a Belzuki. They had an
oh
old
yeah,
Belzuki in the corner that was missing there. He pop things out of things, that in there. He doesn't care. And he doesn't want people to care either. He only wants you to care how it sounds.
yeah.
And it's amazing. But it's known for cheapness more than what Carter is known for prestige. And so it's not that one is better than the other, but they're like bookstores and record stores. They're, they're cultural entities. And so I can understand why this Charlie's Place would be too.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, that's a good point that you made. Like, um, the high end vintage stuff is super cool. You know, very very cool stuff to be around and get to play. It's not for the everyday consumer. It's just not like if I had to say that if there's one downside to that stuff, it's that like the people that are large, by and large, the people that are purchasing that high end stuff don't play. It's not about playing.
Hmm.
It's about collecting, right?
Hmm.
Unless you're like a really, notable, famous guitar player, right? It's not for you.
Hmm.
Um,
Because you don't want to use them because they're priceless, and that you've got that
well, I
aspect.
mean, yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
like,
you can play them, but you know what I mean. I mean, not use them.
well, it's just that you can't, if
Yeah,
we're talking about a $350,000 guitar, that's not for me, It's not really for anybody that I know, you know.
yeah.
Not that we wouldn't
I
like it, it's that we can't, it's just not, it's not realistic.
Yeah,
Um,
as I like to say, not my demographic.
right.
Period. I'm
Now the
collecting guitars, and this one I bought from a thrift store in Compton, California, and I paid $425 for it. That's my
right.
guitar collection,
That's my
which
speed
is
right there.
which is what the point of me buying them. I had to buy a new countertop yesterday, apropos of
Yeah,
nothing. I teased Matthew. I said, should I buy a new countertop or four Danelectros? Because that's how many Danelectros I could buy for what I'm going to have to buy for this $31.
yeah, yeah,
31 square feet of countertop space. They're inexpensive to collect, and that's why I love them. That's why you fell in love with them. You
yeah,
partially, you know, they were affordable. So you make things that you don't have to pay too much for. There's even more to love. They didn't cost that much.
yeah. Well, and
It,
and it's not. It's like it ticks all the boxes. Like
yeah.
it's affordable. It sounds good, and aesthetically, it's cool. They look cool. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're unique. That's what that was kind of the point that I was going to make with the high end stuff. Is like whenever that stuff would come into Carter's, everybody would kind of stop what they're doing and be like, "Oh, there's a '59 Les Paul or whatever it is," and everybody would gather around and yeah, totally. Which is that's cool. I would get equally as excited when like a cool airline
Hmm.
would come through the door. That's the kind of stuff that I really think is cool. You know, the airlines, the
Blows
Silvertones,
your skirt up.
yeah, the Supros, the Den Electros,
The
that
ones, like you said, so many people's first guitars
yeah,
can't be replicated, and that's what these were.
yeah,
I mean, I find story after story. I just found a new one where Steve Cropper, of all people, talks about mowing lawns all summer long to buy a guitar from Sears and waiting on the porch for hours, waiting for the Sears truck
yeah,
so he could this guitar and what it was exactly. And I said, man, that is more important. That's his. It's not that it's more important, but that's more. That's more of an inflection point than anything. The excitement, and then he had to work so hard for it. These were guitars that were either earned or gifted to people that it meant something. Not everybody got a Fender set up when they decided to play guitar.
yeah,
My cohort, his dad was an international businessman, and he was a reserve officer. And when he wanted to play guitar, his dad went down to the PDX or something in Hong Kong and bought him a Les Paul.
yeah,
I told him not everybody got that.
right. No,
We have been at this over an hour. I told you I can't stop myself. And I
yeah, it's
appreciate the time that people like you give me because you're looking after a young son, you're running a business, you're designing guitars, you're scheming pickups, sometimes playing music. And I really appreciate the time you gave me today, Mr.
of
Cofer.
course, yeah, yeah. Every guitar guy's favorite subject, is guitar. So we'll all talk about them as long as we can.
I want to say one thing before I let you go, other than I'm going to be calling you again at some point. I'll see a new guitar or something interesting, and that way we don't have to redo all this stuff. Then we can have a quick chat.
Sure.
What is the best way for somebody who needs somebody like you to reach you and see what your business, now that you're a independent businessman, what is the best way for people to find you and see what you're doing and give you business, keep you busy, although I know you're already business. And you teach, you instruct at this same college, I want people to know.
Yeah,
That,
I do now. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I
two
guess
days a week or something, or 3 days a
yeah,
week.
yeah, I
Yeah,
do. I sort of help out over there a couple days a week.
fantastic.
The best way, I guess, much like most people these days, is just Instagram. I'm generally bad about posting, but that's the way a lot of new clients get in touch with me is just send me a message on Instagram. There's also it's something that my buddy Dave, who we spoke about earlier, Dave Johnson, has
Hmm.
kind of put together along with Jack from Jack's Guitarcheology. I
Oh,
don't know
I
if
know,
you've
I've met
heard.
him. I drove out to
Okay.
see your shop. Okay.
So he's another guy you should talk to.
I want to.
He's pretty passionate about this stuff too. So Dave and Jack have put together a master list of local luthiers and repair people here in Nashville that anyone can go and reference in order to find the service that they're looking for.
And where
Um,
do you find? I didn't even know this about Jack. I went out to his wonderful shop, by the way.
yeah,
So where do you find this? Is it online?
it's on Jack's website. It's at the
Okay.
Guitarcheology website. You can find it there. I think it's
Jack's guitar archaeology, he marries two words together, right?
yeah, guitar
Yeah,
theology.
yeah. He's got a
Yeah,
great shop in Lebanon, Tennessee with all
yeah,
kinds. It's a house of wonders. New guitars, old guitars, things he's modified, makes him a luthier. Not, he's got a lot of cool stuff in there that he's
yeah,
saved and modified and all kinds of stuff. Find him online. He's a real hustler and he's got a lot of irons in the fire and things going. Another community leader.
yeah,
Jack.
yeah. Um,
Uh,
so that list, you can find me on the list, as well as basically every other reputable repair person in town. It's sort of organized not only by like, specialty,
mhm.
but also by geography, I guess. Like you can find somebody close to you in your neighborhood or your area.
It makes a
Um,
difference. The city's getting very big.
yeah, I'll show you this really quickly.
Yeah,
This is a new Masonite guitar that I'm building.
very. Is that?
This
Are
is
we
my
go? uh, What's the shape we're going here for?
so this is actually my shape, same shape that JD's baritone guitar is, the sort
Excellent.
of the prototype. It's uh, very much inspired by the old airline kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But this is a hollow masonite poplar frame. This will be a baritone.
Okay, now
Um,
I got another question for you, and this is something I've been dying to ask. I've been defending these guitars to people when they go, "You can't do that. You can't do it. It'll get beat up." These finishes, this thing was worn to hell. I'm going to show you the back of this. Okay, the reason
mhm.
why I bought this is that somebody played the hell out of it, and
Yeah,
I bought the amp in case because I just wanted it as a cultural thing, just like these people collect vintage toys. Look at the use on the back of this bad boy.
hmm,
What
yeah,
I'm finding is that the painted masonite, except for sometimes a sparkle paint, some of them held up better than others. Painted masonite really holds up. I think this is an early one. I think it's a 62, 63, and somebody paid the heck. That look at the pick guard. They wore it
yeah,
all the way down. Well,
yeah.
what is the paint? I've had people when I opine about that, people go, "How did they paint them?" I do not know. How do you paint? How did you paint Sweeney's guitar? By the way, I love the finish on it. It's kind of flat. It's not too shiny.
Yeah.
How did you
So
do?
that's kind of a funny story. I mean, traditionally, the way that they painted those in the 60s was just color, no clear coat, right? That's why they wear on so quickly, is because there's no clear coat on top of the color. They sprayed them as quick and dirty, like we
Mm-hmm.
call it. Generally nowadays you would spray your color and then put a bunch of clear coats on top to protect the color so you wouldn't wear down as quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were just doing it quick and cheap.
Mm-hmm.
The mason, so that's why the neck would wear through, because the necks generally were made out of poplar, right, which is a hard wood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Masonite, as I'm sure you are aware, is essentially like hard pressed cardboard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's absorbent, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the first few times I tried to spray masonite, it just soaks it up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like a sponge. So I realized you have to essentially put a base coat or like a wash coat of lacquer down on top, which you should really do anyways on any guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to sort of seal the masonite before you put color down, otherwise it'll just soak right in. And that might be a reason why they don't wear as easily, is because that color has sort of soaked into the material.
I
The
told you
way,
when. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, it's okay. The way I painted Pat's Telly was like the dumbest way anybody should ever paint a guitar.
It
So
looks
stupid.
good. So tell us how you did it.
I did it with rattle cans. It's all lacquer, by the way. The material is nitrocellulose lacquer. That's what they used back in the day, and that's what we still use now. So I was in that duplex here in Madison, although down the road a ways. Living in a duplex. You can buy nitro lacquer in spray cans, right? And so I laid the base color, the black, down,
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to like Michael's and got a can of spray glitter, right? That's how you get the sort of sparkle, right? And then I put clear on top of that. Now the dumb thing that I did was I figured, okay, I'm gonna paint this outside for obvious reasons. Like that stuff is super toxic and really bad for you. So I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
spray it outside, but I got a
Mm-hmm.
fan in the bathroom. So I'm just gonna run it in the house and hang it in the bathroom, turn the fan on and shut the door. Not realizing that the fan is just blowing it up into the attic and then it's just coming back down through all the vents and I'm just essentially huffing nitro lacquer for like 2 days.
High as hell.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out why. I was like, man, I feel like super lethargic and like just like napped basically for 2 days. Because at a certain point you kind of go nose blind to it and you can't really smell it anymore.
The
You
luthier's
know?
ultimate demise. He gassed
Yeah.
himself. I'm glad that you learned better before you had a child.
I mean, like you'll see. There's old videos that you can see on YouTube of people like they're basically like factory tours from Gibson or Fender. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's another one of like Jimmy DeQuisto, who's like a famous archtop builder in like the 70s, and they're just like no mask, hosing down like lacquer, you know what I mean, in a tiny little room.
Hey, there was asbestos on the ceiling.
Yeah, yeah,
Amazing. Okay, so it is matte. It's kind of a matte, like it's not super shiny. You have to look at it closely before you realize there's some sparkle in there. I love the finish on it.
yeah,
I'm glad.
yeah. It is. So
I'm glad you
Matt
didn't.
is.
I'm glad you didn't die doing it, but it is a very
Yeah.
nice finish.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the Masonite stuff is like, you know, it's pretty low stakes, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time like getting this perfect gloss finish on it. That's not really what it's about. A lot of times on the last few Masonite guitars that I've made, I'll do instead of doing like a gloss clear coat, I'll do a matte clear coat,
Mm-hmm.
which gives it that sort of flat
Mm-hmm.
uh, appearance.
I like
Um,
it.
Not only because it looks cool, because it's also because like you don't have to buff it, which you don't have to wet sand it or buff it or do any of that stuff. So it
Mm-hmm.
shaves off like a considerable amount of time when you're trying to finish a guitar.
I like it. Cars have that more. I mean, it's all preference. You want a high gloss? Do you want a matte? Do you want candy apple? Do you want this? Do you
Hmm.
want that? And you answered some great questions for me. And I told you that my father worked. He was a forestry person. Masonite is fiberboard.
Yeah.
Masonite is, if you go to Laurel, Mississippi, have you ever driven to New Orleans? Well, you've driven the same highways. If you're from Texas, you've driven the same highways I have.
Hmm.
When you're on that 59 and you're 40 or 50 miles from Hattiesburg, you see that thing. It says Masonite Road.
Okay.
Nobody needs to write a blues song called Masonite Road. Anyway, that's where Masonite was patented, and that's where it's from. And they kind of after the war, they really started kicking off because Nathan Daniels building things out of it, guitars and everything else. And when I started defending these as painted surfaces that really hold up, a lot of people were dismissive. And I thought one reason why this material is still used in construction, doors and windows, is that when properly sealed and painted right, it really holds up, maybe better than wood. And I
Yeah.
think my anecdotal experience is when you go to Carter and you do have those vintage things, what do they have all around it? Chipped and flaking paint.
Right.
And Masonite, you see more of a wearing of it. It's just a different. I'm
Hmm.
not saying one's better than the other, but does that look like a relic behind me? This thing is 60 years old, and the
Yeah.
only thing that wore down on it was the pick guard. And I think it's because Masonite, whatever reason, it held up, and
Yeah.
that, and I love the defense of it.
Yeah. It's
And
impact resistant. You know,
yeah,
you
and
can drop it and it's not going to break. And there's no clear coat, so there's nothing to check. Like when you see those old guitars that are all checked and stuff like that, which is desirable to a lot of people, the clear coat is what's checking, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not the color. So if there's no clear coat, there's no
I
checking,
made a
you know.
joke to Jeff Sen. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah, I
Senn.
just ordered one of his bridges.
Yeah, I made the joke with him. He's connected with me on Instagram. Anyway, I said, I bet these guitars will float. And he made some comment about the flood. And, it's probably true. They will float. Like,
Probably 20 of them floating down the river.
my goodness. Well, I kept you 3 times longer than I said I would. An
It's
hour
okay.
and 20 minutes. I cannot thank you enough. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime soon. I'm convinced that we must have met at some point.
I'm sure, yeah.
But I can't wait to meet you again. I've admired your workmanship. I can't thank you enough for the time you spent with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. That was fun.
I know that I hope they pay you something at the luthier school, and I didn't give you anything other than huge props for teaching me some things and being a
Nah,
community leader. Everybody, Wade Cofer's got some cool stuff. Everybody, for a few weeks, every time I turned around, somebody was talking him up. So get on it and get you some service work, new guitar. JD Samo loves him. Patrick Sweeney loves him. Matthew Page loves him, and now Emily Walters loves him. He is firmly installed as a lipstick pickup sympathetic string.
thank you.
I appreciate your time. I'm going to hit stop now, say goodbye to our listeners.
Bye,
And then
everybody.
I'm going to only take one more second to tell you how awesome you are. Okay. Goodbye, listeners. Goodbye, Wade.
Bye.
If you hear excellent tone and the sound of birds chirping, it means you've made it through an entire episode of the Lipstick Pickup Podcast. You're as free as a bird now, but I hope you'll join me again soon. Comments or questions? I can be reached at emily@thelipstickpickup.com.